Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. Let's dive right in. And I would just love to thank you, Stacy, for hosting us all tonight and the Greater Rochester Libraries for hosting this entire series. I mean, has it been, I don't even know, 18 months now? It's been
Yeah.
this pandemic journey. And thank you. And I love libraries. I always have and I always will. And you are no small part of that, my friends. And thank you to everyone who is showing up live on this beautiful, beautiful night. Of all the things you could be doing, friends, it's such a joy. Thank you for accompanying me tonight. And please don't be shy. I'm woefully capable of monologues, and I much prefer dialogue. So anytime you have a question, pop it in the chat. Stacy will be on chat and she will be jumping in if there's any clarifying questions to be sure that I am speaking in ways that we all are on board. And if there are big overarching questions, existential questions, I've got plenty of those myself. And we have plenty of time at the end for some not live Q&A because I don't have any answers, but I do have lots of questions, and good questions just beget deeper questions. So we'll have lots of time at the end for some Q and Q. And without further ado, I would love to read you a poem. Before we talk about the how to grow garlic, let's talk about why. This is a poem called Plenty and Enough. Underground, the garlic is multiplying. Yesterday, we planted one. Tomorrow, there will be many. And abundance is the dream this world is made from. Abundance, not too much for anyone, but plenty and enough for all. Thank you, friends, for joining us tonight as we grow our garlic, as we grow ourselves, as we grow garlic, not just for us and not just our friends and family, but thinking of all of the mycelium in the soil and all of the future generations of all generations to come, of all species that surround us. We grow garlic as we grow ourselves. May it be delicious and resilient. So I'd love to start with a tiny little story, then a little backdrop of history, and then kind of a handful of really core things to keep in mind, the common mistakes people make. And so here we go. I just want to start with this story because I grew up in my father's garden about 10 miles outside Naples in South Bristol. And we always grew garlic and it was always so delicious and I loved growing it. But here's the thing, we'd go to the grocery store and I'd be like, wow, they grow big garlic that they have here in the grocery store. And I laugh because now if I ever go into a grocery store, especially in pandemic times, I can't even think the last time I was in a grocery store. Heavens. I'm one of the most privileged people on the planet. But anytime I see and I walk into walk into a grocery store and look at the garlic, it's so small. And now I know that what you have in a grocery store is culinary garlic. It's edible grade garlic. It's not seed grade garlic. And so, what I would love to share with you, friends, is not just how to grow garlic, but how to grow, of course, delicious culinary garlic. But if you want to save the seed and have it be the most big, beautiful garlic you've ever seen, this is my head and this is this garlic. I would love for you to grow garlic this glorious and also to be happy with whatever you grow. I will always be so grateful that growing those tiny little garlic bulbs with my father meant so much to me. So let's not get attached to anything. But that being said, let's grow garlic and glorious garlic. And when we plant garlic, we are joining the last 6,000 years of humans and garlic co-adapting with each other. Native to Central Asia, there's over 5,000 varieties of garlic in 6 different DNA types, so many different flavors, just like apples aren't just apples. Red Delicious, Empire, Gala, Macoun, Cox's Orange Pippin. There are so many different flavors of apple, right? There's so many different flavors of garlic. And of course, our food is our medicine, but garlic especially is such powerful medicine as well. It was so beloved in Egypt that the pharaohs were often buried with garlic shaped clay pots stuffed full of garlic to bring with them into the afterlife. And also, such powerful food and medicine that the two uprisings of the enslaved people who were building the pyramids in ancient Egypt, when their garlic rations were removed, among other atrocities. And I don't say that lightly. That is why the revolutions happened. So yes, this is food, it is medicine, and it is resistance. So yes, let's grow garlic for all these reasons that are all just an expression of love. What we grow grows us, what we change changes us, and yes, let's grow garlic. So let's talk about the types of garlic first and foremost. There's hardneck, softneck, and then there's elephant garlic. So elephant garlic is actually not garlic. It is more closely related to leek in terms of botanical notions of the world. But it's less cold hardy than a hardneck garlic. And in general, I definitely grew up never having grown elephant garlic except for the one year that we tried and it all died. So I always thought that it was not cold hardy enough for us to grow here in Zone 5. And I think I was right when I was little. But here's the thing, this Amish family, I'm pointing to Lancaster, PA, this Amish family in Pennsylvania for a few decades has been regionally adapting this glorious elephant garlic for short seasons. So we've been growing that on our farm for the last 4 years, taking it to the next level here in the North Country, as it were. And so garlic, elephant garlic does throw a scape, although it's actually a seed head and it tastes more like an onion, more like a leek than like garlic. So hardneck and softneck garlics are pretty self-explanatory in that neck department. The hardneck garlic has this hard neck that goes all the way from the basal plate all the way up through the plant. And when it throws its garlic scape in June, those delectable scapes that they're almost flowering, except they're full of all of these little propagules of garlic rather than true seeds. And that garlic is the extension of the hardneck. Other things about hardneck garlic, if you want a scape, that's your option. Softneck doesn't have scapes. Also, they're cold hardy. They are the most cold hardy varieties, these hardneck varieties. And also, generally, they have a single ring of cloves around the center, although some varieties have double, but generally they are a single ring of very large cloves. Soft neck varieties, by contrast, they don't have that hard neck, so if you want to grate garlic, that is your option. They're generally less cold hardy, but our two varieties that we share at Fruition are incredibly well adapted to short seasons, and they generally have smaller cloves and they have a full double ring of cloves also. And there are so many different varieties. Some are more strong, some are more balanced and sweet, some are easier to peel, harder to peel. There's so much to say. And I just would love to lift up as we dive into the technicalities of how to grow garlic. If you are hungry for so much more info, there is always more to share. And check out, if you haven't already, our free online course, our Garlic and Shallot Academy. It has dozens of step-by-step video tutorials throughout the seasons. We also have a garlic growing guide that it is this many-page growing guide to send you through the seasons. And we also, when we share our garlic, you'll see these little love notes that we tuck in every order with some keys to keep in mind too. So you are so not alone, and let's dive in. So first and foremost, choosing the right variety for you, honestly, is a lifelong journey of discovery. And the biggest mistake that people make in this is planting culinary grade garlic rather than seed grade garlic. and planting anything but the biggest, most beautiful, healthiest garlic that they can find. It's really common for people to grow garlic that is from a grocery store or even from a farmer's market. But here's the thing, there's culinary grade garlic and there's seed grade garlic. Culinary garlic is always going to be smaller, but it also isn't tested, whether it's for nematodes, for rust, for other kinds of disease. Culinary garlic is just there to be sold, munched, and if it has nematodes, you won't know the difference as an eater of it. I won't know the difference as an eater of it. It's only if we replant that will be trouble. So one of the easiest mistakes that people make and easiest ways to avoid it is just to not be tempted to plant culinary or smaller grade garlic. So where can you find good garlic? And I'm not here to be like, go to fruitionseeds.com. I mean, you can, but you probably have awesome farmers around you too. And go ahead and ask them what they are sowing and even ask if they have any extra. Sometimes we have extra that we always expect to plant this much and we save this many bulbs, but then if we have a few dozen or a few hundred extra after we plant, that's among other reasons why we have friends. So if you know any farmers, don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. And yeah, bigger is better is a phrase that I only use in a container gardening and also with garlic. I mean, you want to be planting the biggest, most beautiful garlic that you can find. There's a direct relationship between what you reap and what you sow. And if you can find garlic that is half the size of your head, like it's just that much more likely to grow half the size of your head or a quarter of the size of your head compared to it's easier to go from here to here rather than here to here to here. So yes, now let's talk about timing. And this is basically you have till late September through Thanksgiving, essentially till the ground is frozen here in zone 5. And we've learned this is one of the ways where I just would love to lift up that I'm constantly learning. We are constantly learning here at Fruition Seeds, where we would always plant between Halloween and October. And that's what we've told people for the last decade. And it is so, we've been learning from some of our favorite farmer friends who also grow lots of garlic that they actually plant at the end of September. And as long as it's well mulched, it does just fine and tends to emerge that much earlier in spring. And they feel that it gives them that much more of an edge, that the garlic can be that much bigger. So we're always willing to try. And we are by no means doing empirical research, but we're pretty into it, especially because, as we will talk about next, soil preparation is so crucial for everything, and especially garlic. And especially if you're tilling your soil, it's vital to be not tilling when the soil is wet. And in autumn, with the soil being cooler and so much rain falling, preparing soil in October is just a recipe for destroying soil structure. So that's where we have started to embrace this planting of garlic in our late September. We've honestly already prepped our bed. We threw a tarp over it and we'll be planting at the end of September. But your timing, you can totally plant honestly until your hands aren't able to go in the ground. Literally, I've helped friends in January in a thaw plant garlic. It was not pleasant for us humans, but the garlic is going to be totally fine. So there's a lot more to share about these nuances, and I share much more in that our Garlic and Shallot Academy. And oh my gosh, Stacy, I saw Paul ask a question, so I want to make sure that we jump on in.
Yeah, Paul's question is, what's your take on waiting till just after the first fall frost? Is it really necessary, or?
You know, did I say I'm not an empirical research scientist? But we will definitely be planting it before fall. Well, I can't say definitely who knows if it might frost next week. But we're planning on about 2 weeks from now planting our garlic, which at this point, looking at the moon cycle and the long-term forecast, I'm going to be really shocked if it frosts before we plant our garlic. So yeah, we're constantly learning. I mean, the earth isn't flat, or is it? I mean, science is constantly just asking deeper questions. So we're learning more and more all the time, sometimes turning truths on top of their head as we learn deeper truths. And there's always a deeper truth. So who knows? In 5 years, we might also be like, no, really, wait till Thanksgiving. It's much better. But as of this moment, that's what we're going off of. And I'm really, from our experience the last 3 years of planting on the much earlier side, we love it for a lot of reasons.
Joanna wanted you to know that she wanted to say thank you for the free course you had offered at the beginning of the pandemic. It really helped her health. And she wonders if you have a garlic recommendation for her zone 3.
Yes, I would go with just the hardnecks. And if you want to try a soft neck, go for it. Of both of our soft necks, both of which are sold out, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they're definitely sold out at this moment on our website. We'll be doing, as we are shipping orders right now, we'll be doing a final inventory. So there's a chance that we might have some more, especially of the Enchilium. I would plant the Regatuso, our Regatuso softneck, as a trial. I would just get a few bulbs to try. But otherwise, I would stick to the hardnecks. They'll be that much more cold hardy. And honestly, any of our hardnecks are going to be equally resilient in zone 3. Our dear friend who lives outside Denali, Alaska, grows all of our hardnecks. Our soft neck hasn't thrived for her yet, but all of her hardnecks, yes.
Bev asks if she grows seed garlic, will the finished garlic next spring be the same quality as purchased seed garlic? In other words, can I plant what I have harvested the following fall, or do I need to plant purchased seed garlic again?
It so depends. The answer could be yes, and it could be no. The only reason that it would be no is if it's not as big as what you planted. If it's smaller, I would consider getting fresh stock, and then whether it's compost, worm castings, or garlic and shallot fertilizer, there's something in your soil that is not encouraging the garlic to grow bigger as it wants to. Instead, it's growing smaller. So you want to grow garlic that is just on this up and up trajectory. And of course, there's nothing to stop you. Like, you can always plant smaller garlic and be feeding it and really taking care of it. And then it will be getting larger and larger each season. But yeah, if your garlic is getting notably smaller, I would just eat it, and I would continue to get a soil test and just dial in your fertility and your cultural practices so that it's consistently getting bigger. And when you are consistently getting bigger garlic, then absolutely, that's all we do is replant the biggest I mean, honestly, we are we are putting this in the mail. This is our Italy Hill, our giant porcelain garlic. This is actually this is smaller than what we plant of it. So isn't that crazy? Like, the very biggest, oh my gosh, is this even okay to be mentioning? It's true. We keep the very biggest ourselves so that we can be planting the best, so we can be giving you the best. And it's not like we give you, this is not sad looking garlic. But yes, you want the biggest, most beautiful, bodacious garlic that you want to eat most. That's what you want to plant. It's so hard instead of eat. And yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about the fertility next. So should I jump into that, or is there another question?
Well, Sue wanted to know, when you say mulch your prepared garden bed, do you mean mulch? I was told no mulch in the garden.
Ooh, well, we actually have section 7 is to mulch or not to mulch. So if it's not too mulchuous, Let's hold off for the mulch conversation till the mulch section. Pardon me as I crack myself. um, so yeah, let's talk about soil prep because I don't know if Rudyard Kipling actually wrote a Just So story about soil prep, but I definitely imagine what it might be in my brain. And it is quite, it makes a huge difference with everything, and especially garlic, because garlic is one of the heaviest feeding plants that you will ever grow in your garden. And there's a direct relationship between what you reap and what you sow. So it's a combination of putting the biggest, most glorious garlic that you can find in the ground, but if it's not soil tested and the pH is off and you haven't put on lots of juicy, yummy fertility, then they're still going to grow really small and get more stressed and not be healthy and thus be less delicious as well as less abundant. So, yes, you can till for garlic. You can also not till for garlic. You've got lots of options. Whether if you are tilling, just be sure that you are incorporating any of that, whether it's compost, worm castings. We have this glorious garlic and shallot fertilizer that my partner Matthew has been dialing in for almost a decade now. And so it makes a huge difference to be testing your soil. If you haven't already, check out our blog. You can just search in the blog soil test and it'll come right up. And for $20, you will learn so much. And so you want to make sure that your soil as a baseline is like an adequate pH to begin with. And then just make sure that you are actually and feeding it and not skimping. The biggest mistake that people make in this soil prep department is not adding enough fertility or adding too much nitrogen fertility. If it's too nitrogen rich, you'll get lots of leaves and not as much bulb development. So that's where um, between worm castings, compost, our garlic and shallot fertilizer, and also whether you have compost tea or our fish and kelp emulsion, any foliar feeding you can do in the spring will make a huge difference. Um, so yeah, I saw there was a question there, Stacy. Jump on.
Can you speak to feeding the garlic bed? When do you do that in relation to the planting? And also the person um, has had a really nice barn clean out that's a mix of chicken, sheep, and alpaca manure and hay that they're trying to incorporate. What are your thoughts on that?
Awesome. So, in terms of timing, if you are tilling your soil, you want to actively till anything that you are incorporating in at tillage. So, that could be right before planting. For us, it was perfect last week to till that bed. The moisture of the soil was absolutely perfect. So, we tilled it 2, 3 weeks earlier than we were going to plant into it. We put a huge tarp down over it so that the weeds won't be growing. But you want, if you're tilling, incorporate that fertility as you're tilling. If you're not tilling, you want to, if you're broad forking or just gently incorporating, you want to be sprinkling it on the soil right before you are planting. No earlier than 2 weeks, otherwise it might leach out in a way that isn't, you won't be realizing that benefit in your garlic. And I'm so excited to hear what you learn about chicken and alpaca and if it's fully composted, that'll be amazing. And in case you smell in any way when you smell it, if it doesn't smell delicious, if you literally like don't want to like put your face right in it or potentially like rub some on it doesn't smell that good. If it at all smells like ammonia, it has labile nitrogen that is just going to burn your plants, and not like singe fire. That burning plants in that context looks like it's literally at the like molecular level is kind of singeing your rootlets. And so it's infringing on the plant's ability to actually uptake nutrients because of the NH, it's like NH4, it's ammonia, it's Nitrogen not in an assimilatable form. Oh my gosh, we should talk soil chemistry one day. So if it's beautifully broken down, I'm all in. Sometimes it can be hard to know if it's fully broken down. So I might be tempted to just do a partial bed with that, to treat it with a partial, with only some of your garlic with that. So if it does fabulously, wonderful. If it doesn't do fabulously, you didn't commit your whole and lose your whole crop. And that way, I always love to do side by side kinds of experiments. So that's my offering to you, my friend.
Um, Two things from this person. What adds the nitrogen to the soil and what things should I avoid? And also, are you sold out of the Italy Hill garlic?
Ooh, I not looking at at our website right this moment. If it says sold out of Italy Hill, chances are, so we're in this special moment right now of playing it safe. We always, so we're literally, we know our garlic weights, but because garlic, the bulbs are a little different shape and we share our garlic by the bulb, we know that we have this basic, oh, Stuart says it's not sold out. Amazing. Yeah, even if you see varieties that are sold out, go ahead and say, email me when back in stock, because there are some varieties that we knew we would have this much to sell. And as we are actively packing thousands of orders this week, we are like updating our inventory so we have exact numbers. So we don't want to oversell garlic. That's just the saddest thing in the world. So we always put our numbers low. And then as we are in the process of sending out all our garlic, then we update it. So if you want to be sure, if you want garlic that says it's sold out, it may in fact be sold out, but we may also just be playing it safe for the next couple of weeks. So if you put email me back in stock, click that button, and yeah, but that way, yeah, I'm so glad. Thank you for whoever looked up Italy Hill on the website. I so appreciate you. I feel like I didn't actually answer the more fun part of that question.
Oh, yeah. The second part was what adds nitrogen to the soil and what should you avoid?
So NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, are these three uppercase letters that stand for those primary macronutrients. And any like most fertilizers will say what their NPK is. So you just want to make sure that your nitrogen is not that first number of the three is not larger than the second and the third. So you want to make sure that it's really well balanced. So if sometimes it's, you know, you can find, so that's the easiest way there. Otherwise, take a look at your soil test and see how much nitrogen may or may not be already rich in your soil to begin with, and that can also help guide the process. And if you're choosing to mulch, you can totally use grass clippings, but that is tons of nitrogen, tons of green. And so yeah, you can totally use lots of grass clippings, but you want to use it in concert with whether it's straw or deciduous leaves, some kind of green. You want to combine that green with the brown so that it's more balanced and not just too nitrogen rich.
Amy is wondering if she hasn't tested her soil, should she not grow garlic this year or just compost, fertilize, feed, and hope for the best? She was going to try to test this fall for spring, but was considering trying garlic for the first time. She's guessing she wouldn't get her results back in time. Sorry.
Oh, that's so real. Yeah, I would absolutely plant it this fall, my friend. And I would absolutely get your soil test too. Garlic is pretty, especially if you've already gardened before and you were reasonably happy with the relative health of your garden, chances are your your pH is not totally out of whack. And just, especially with putting in the compost, putting in that fertilizer, that extra love and care, I think I would absolutely take that chance.
And last, your thoughts on coffee grounds as a source of nitrogen?
It is the most acidic nitrogen. That was superlative. I'm sure it's not the most acidic nitrogen, but it is such an acidic nitrogen. So I would recommend putting your coffee grounds in your compost and letting that compost fully break down so that you have no idea what was once in your compost. If you can see a banana peel, it's not compost yet. If you can see it smells a little bit like coffee, it's not compost yet. So as it turns into compost, that acidity will neutralize, and that nitrogen will also just find its balance among all the other nutrients. So yeah, coffee grounds are going to be great for your garlic and for everything. Just make sure it's composted first would be my recommendation. And I would love to hear if anyone else has any other experiences.
Stuart commented that a different site from Oregon State University says coffee grounds are not acidic.
Oh, wow. Cool. I love being wrong. It's interesting. It's acidic in our bodies, but not in the soil. Oh my gosh. Cool. Well, thanks, Stuart. I can't wait to check out that article. And don't listen to me. The
There is a link, so if anybody's interested in pursuing that.
article. Never doubt. I am here just climbing the mountain, and we're all climbing the mountain together, friends. That's awesome. Thanks, Stuart.
He says the acid, just as an aside, the acid is actually in the brew. So
Mind blown. That's so awesome. Cool. I can't wait to learn more. And all the time, I'm like, what are these other things that I think are true that are just objectively not true? More things than I realize.
um,
Awesome.
Kathy's wondering, can you mulch with composted cow manure and ground pine bark?
I would, Stuart, go check out Oregon State. I would say pine bark is acidic as heck, but no, but let me not make a, a fool of myself twice in a row. So pine bark and just softwoods in general, but especially conifers tend to be quite acidic. So I would, and bark in general tends to be quite carboniferous, which is also that carbon is going to tie up nitrogen. But the other part, as long as you have, if it's fully composted manure, why not? I mean, you can have, sometimes cow manure can have weeds. So sometimes compost can too, if it's not like really hot composted manure. So yeah, I would definitely hold off on the bark, and I would perhaps just test out with the mulch. I do like to mulch with something carbon, because if you are mulching with compost, you tend to have to put on like inches and inches and so much because it's incorporating to the soil really quickly, and it's not the same weed barrier that something that is like leaves or straw, something that's more carbon heavy would be.
Carol has a small city garden and she's been practicing square foot gardening, which means her raised beds are a mix of vermiculite, coconut coir, and mixed compost, including manure. Do you think that soil should work?
Could you read that off one more time, Stacy?
Sure. Vermiculite, coconut, COIR, coir.
Yeah, core is generally how I hear people pronounce it.
Mixed compost, including manure.
Ooh, that definitely doesn't make me excited, to be totally honest. But honestly, it's really hard to fill raised beds and containers with really high quality soil. It's really, really hard. The coconut coir has no nutrients, so it's just filler. And it's keeping the soil light, porous, aerated, which is not the worst, but also it's not offering any nutrients. So it's honestly not that great. Vermiculite also is just aerating, just taking up space, absolutely zero nutrition capacity. And so then you've got compost, which you can I would consider just growing in straight compost compared to adding the coconut coir and the vermiculite. But I would, I honestly had this really fun experience of FaceTiming with my sister as she went all around Rochester this spring, looking at all of these different places and like actively picking up what they were offering as raised bed vegetable mix soil, like topsoil plus compost. And we went to 6 places before we found one that I was like, yeah, take that home. And it's so variable, they really, because it's something that is really hard to produce consistently at scale. All of these places in greater Rochester, I've heard really great things from, and also kind of not great things from. And they just, it's really hard to produce consistent product like that. So not just taking it for granted that someone else had a great experience, but actively going in and ask for the soil test, so that you can be sure at least that the pH is actually adequate. I can't tell you how many people have bought really expensive vegetable raised bed soil that it just isn't. So I feel like I'm not being very helpful. It's really, really challenging. But go ahead and check in with lots of different nurseries and take a look at least 3 different places before you purchase anything, just to get a sense and a sense of range and scope and scale, and smell it and feel it. And yeah, that would, my heart goes out to you, but I would definitely, if nothing else, just plant into straight compost. But you can ditch the vermiculite and the coconut coir.
Anne is wondering if you can plant garlic several years in the same bed.
Woo, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. No, I mean, it might not be the worst, but you're playing with fire. Here's a few reasons why. Number one, garlic is just on the like low key scale. Garlic is just a heavy feeder. So you can definitely add lots of great nutrients into the soil, but it's just asking for trouble to plant a really heavy feeding crop immediately after having feeding crop. So just plant it in a new place every year. And here's the deeper reason why. Monoculture of the mind. Vandana Shiva, we love you. And one of the reasons that this is problematic, among so many others, is that diseases can build up and pest insects can build up. And so, especially in the allium family and garlic, onions, shallots, leeks, scallions, anything in that allium family, they all are susceptible to similar diseases. And so you want to not only just not grow garlic in the same place next year, don't grow onions or shallots or leeks or chives or anything in that family. And honestly, we have a 10-year rotation because we don't want to mess around. And we only know a handful of farmers that have tried to, just they have smaller land bases, and so their rotations haven't been as extensive. And if you get white rot in your soil, you can't grow garlic there for 30 years. So it's just not worth it. And that affects not only your garlic, but your onions, leeks, shallots, all the alliums. So yeah, that's where rotation is so important from the disease aspect, and certainly just from the straight up nutritional aspect as well.
Evan is curious to have more clarification on what is softneck garlic versus the hardneck garlic. Or is there a hardneck garlic?
Yeah, so for hardneck, softneck, I'm tempted. I'll give you the very brief overview. And if you haven't already, hop in on our website, fruitionseeds.com. And whoa, our Garlic and Shallot Academy goes deep into the differences between hardneck and softneck, and also the 6 different DNA types, because it's absurdly interesting and there's so much more to share. But the core is hardneck garlic has a hard neck, which turns into that garlic scape. It's not good for braiding. It's more cold hardy, and it generally has a single ring of cloves, where soft neck garlic doesn't have the hard neck, so it doesn't throw a scape, but you can braid it much more easily. It tends to be less cold hardy, although ours are quite cold hardy, especially compared to average. And they often have smaller cloves, more cloves, and 2 rings cloves. So there's a crash course in hardneck versus softneck.
Phil is curious, do you need to test your soil once a year? In other words, how frequently does one soil change?
Great question. So we test our soil every year just because it's our job. It's not our job to test the soil, but it's our job to be actively building the soil and being the best stewards of this land that we possibly can. So we honestly invest a lot. We test all of our separate fields, and we're just, every year it feels it's a small way so that we can actually be knowing and tracking, like, how much organic matter are we building in the soil every year. We have, our farm is an old poultry operation, so anytime we plow, we're literally bringing up, like, there's a wishbone. like so, and there's a lot of phosphorus in chicken manure, so we have epically high phosphorus in our soil, which is actually great for seed production, but we can't add phosphorus. Otherwise, it would be a liability. So we just love, if you're interested, if that like kind of makes you curious, I highly recommend testing your soil every year, because it's kind of like going snorkeling once a year and just seeing how things are changing. But honestly, otherwise, every 2, 3 years is fine, and once is better than zero. Yeah. So those are a few thoughts.
Can you plant garlic in the same place where you had planted tomatoes the year before?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're in a totally different family, and they're both heavy feeders, but they're looking for different kinds of fertility. So yeah, you can absolutely follow tomatoes with garlic.
And how far apart should you plant your garlic
Oh
cloves?
my gosh, we haven't even gotten there. So let me just maybe leap into these next sections of how to plant garlic, talking about spacing, depth. And so let's just do that little crash course. So first and foremost, you want to break up your garlic. You want to not plant this bulb of garlic, but break it up into individual cloves and then plant them with the tip up. You see on the bottom, there's that roots and the basal plate of your garlic. You want to make sure that that is pointing down, and any of those tips planting up. And there's a lot of excellent reasons for that. Check out our academy for all the fun nuances and things that can go wrong. But that's those core dynamics. And then spacing, you want to space 6 inches between rows and within rows. We plant garlic on a grid, especially if you're planting in a raised bed or even on a bed that's like 3 by 3 or 3 feet wide. We just plant a grid of garlic going down the bed with 6 inches in between, and between rows and between plants. Full disclosure, on our farm, we actually plant at 8-inch centers, so 8 inches within rows and between rows, because we just want them to have that much more access to soil nutrients and light. That's part of how it's not just the fertility, it's actually that spacing that helps us grow garlic that is this big rather than this big. Another facet to keep in mind is the depth. So because we're planting garlic in the fall, and there's this phenomena of frost heaving. So with the freeze thaw cycles, the frost is, imagine how many like rocks keep popping out of your garden, right? No matter how many times you pick them up and carry them away, more somehow tend to lift up and like get to the surface. So that's frost heaving, bringing, as the freeze thaw cycles are literally bringing things that are denser than the water up through the soil. And so that your garlic is included in that. So you want to be sure that you're at least planting your garlic 3 inches deep. 5 inches if you can manage it. If you're planning on mulching, we'll talk about mulch in just a moment. If you're planning on mulching, you can get away with planting it less deeply, because that mulch is actively moderating those freeze thaw cycles. It's actively mitigating that frost heave motion. And so if you're planning on 5, 6 inches of mulch, you can get away with 3 inches planting your garlic. If you're not planning on mulching, which is totally an option, make sure it's at least 5 inches. And that's also because cold is rarely going to kill garlic. It's native to northern Central Asia. The center of garlic diversity is in the Himalayas. So like and like Pakistan. So many different varieties up in the mountains. So cold is rarely going to kill garlic. Desiccation is what mostly kills garlic. So if that clove of garlic is getting to the upper horizon of soil and getting to that edge, the top of the soil, it's not the cold that will kill it. It's that drying, desiccating winter wind that's going to be just shriveling that garlic away to non-existence. So yeah, let's talk about mulching real quick, and then we'll jump into some more quandaries. So there's pros and cons to everything, right? I love the Malcolm Gladwell notion of, and I'm sure this is just, I don't know, actually, if anyone knows who to attribute this to, I'm sure he didn't make this up. Certainly he didn't make the idea up of advantages are not always advantages. Disadvantages are not always disadvantages. So there are both advantages and disadvantages to mulching and to not mulching. So here's a few mulching pros and cons. So the pros of mulching, you have to do less weeding. If you are also if you are really interested in, like, if you have well drained soil and you want to have more soil moisture retention, mulching is your friend. And but here are the cons. If you don't mulch enough, then you're going to have to hand weed. You have no option but to just pull weeds. There's no hoe that in the world that gets down under mulch itself. So also mulch can come with weed seeds. It doesn't always, but it can often come with weed seeds, even if it's oats, or especially if it's rye or wheat. If there are those wheat berries, or especially the rye berries that are allelopathic, oh, it's such a mess. So it's pretty often that straw, even though they've already harvested the grain, can come along with some grain kernels, which can very easily turn into weeds, because weeds are just plants where you don't want them. So also, like, if you are mulching extensively, it can have later emergence in the spring, especially if you plant late, which isn't always a liability, just something to keep in mind, largely so you're not more concerned than you need to be. Because everyone on Instagram is like, wow, our garlic is up. And 2 weeks later, you're like, my garlic isn't up. What's going wrong? And you just happen to have 6 inches of mulch on and you planted it late. So, while in this mulch department, my favorite mulch is actually deciduous leaves sent through a chipper shredder. So just make sure they're not black walnut, which has lots of juggalo, not so good, but every other deciduous leaf, to my knowledge, is fabulous. Not just carbon and like thus great mulch, but tons of micronutrients. And so think of how deep and extensive and rich our soils are here in the Northeast. There was a mile of ice above us 15,000 years ago. And it's because these deciduous trees drop their leaves every fall for the last 15,000 years, give or take, that our soil has developed so extensively, so quickly. So yes, anytime, I love when people put their leaves in bags on the side of the road. How very convenient. But I do like to put them through chipper shredders, because if that comminution, that like increased surface area, I found that especially broad leaves, like full like maple leaves and full size oak, especially white oak leaves, can be just huge. And if they are like kind of plastered and solid, they can actually inhibit garlic sometimes from emerging through it. So if you have them just chopped into those finer particles, they're going to be much, your garlic is going to be fabulously easily emerging, and you still get all of that mulch capacity. Hot tip, if their leaves aren't moist, put them down and then put a hose over them, like water them in. Otherwise, they blow away, and it's very sad. But also straw and grass clippings are also great options. And if you can get organic straw, so much the better. Stacy, tossing it back to you for some Q and Q.
Okay. Paul is wondering what, if anything, can or should be interplanted with garlic.
Ooh, wow. So I love to interplant spinach and any other cold hardy green that I can eat and harvest easily as baby greens. So that could be cold hardy lettuce. It could also be baby bok choy. And I plant them both in the fall because they're not competing with the garlic above the ground at all, and barely below the ground as well. But we also will tuck transplants. We don't sow seeds because we mulch so much. We just pull the mulch aside, tuck in a tidy little transplant, and let it grow. Honestly, not huge, but 3-4 weeks. We don't harvest the spinach full size. We don't harvest the lettuce full size. We just let them get these nice little leaves and harvest them like that. So they're not, especially in the spring, you can totally interplant, like you're planting your garlic in a grid, right? In 6 or 8 inch centers, 6 inches, 8 inches between rows and within the row. So you've got that spacing, that beautiful spacing for this tiny little bit of greenery. So we definitely do that. And I highly recommend it.
Let's see. Julie wants to know, what if I have no choice but to rotate garlic and shallots and onion close together? Can I do something with the soil in raised beds to rotate every 2 years?
Good question. I'm rather speechless. I want to say yes, and I just don't know. I just don't know. My friend. I'm sure the answer is yes. I've never tested this boundary, so I really am not sure what your best approach is. But I'm really glad that you're asking, and I'm going to think more about this. And I might be tempted to get some really big, although garlic doesn't grow well in containers generally. If you can get a great big container and just like increase or get another raised bed, I think if you can get 3 years in the rotation, I would sleep at night more, more than 2. But there you have my very wishy-washy, anxiety-laden, heartbroken response.
Julie and Martha both are curious, what is white rot? And Martha says she thinks her garden may have had it because they had great garlic for years and then the garlic rotted 2 years in a row. So
sounds right. That sounds right. You can definitely look up white rot garlic. I mean, there's other things get white rot. It's just a general term for lots of diseases and that are very totally different genus species of fungi. But with if you look up white rot garlic, if you just Google that, you'll see lots of exquisitely putrid photographs, and you can get a bit of an idea on that. But yeah, I would say that's exactly what's happening, and I would not plant, honestly, garlic or any other onion, shallots, leek in that bed for the rest of time.
Evan is curious, what happens to the garlic bulb if it is not dug up and left in the ground? Will it grow back the following summer and be okay to dig up the the following summer?
Yes. So our dear friends Dan and Lydia do this. They have garlic in their garden that they are absolutely cultivating for big bodacious garlic. And then they have this like hedgerow that has where they threw some garlic years ago. And they just so what happens is they all imagine this beautiful bulb of garlic is in the ground and they will all be sprouting in the spring. And so they'll all be up on each other. And as they start to, get larger or try to be getting larger in May and especially in June and July, they are just going to be constricting each other. And that competition, that stress, it's like imagine carrots or beets. If you try to grow them too close and not thinned enough, you don't get a big beet. So you won't get a big clove of garlic. You won't get a big bulb of garlic. But why Dan and Lydia persist in just leaving these garlics to do their thing and be very stressed in a certain sense is because they love the garlic greens that grow. So they essentially have this hedgerow of garlic leek chivy kind of plants that it's garlic, it's allium sativum, but because they haven't harvested it and it just continues to grow and not be spread out and not spread out, it's effectively just become this carpet of garlic chives.
Um, Linda says, point taken that garlic should not be planted in the same footprint in successive years. However, is it okay to plant adjacent to the prior year's plot?
Yes, and I know this is so tricky in small spaces. If you can give yourself 10 feet, amazing. If it's less than that, just give it a minimum of 5, but go as much as you can. And I think as long as you're doing 10 feet in between, I wouldn't think twice. And if that includes like a raised bed that's closer where the soil isn't contiguous, just treat that as a different raised bed as an entirely different portion. So um, those measurements are only for contiguous soil.
Karen says in her area, people spray their leaves on the trees with pesticide. Can I use those leaves?
I am so glad you asked. I would not. In a word.
Um, does harvesting some garlic greens affect the size of a garlic bulb?
Ooh, so here's the thing. And this is another tasty little bite that is definitely in the Garlic and Shallot Academy. So definitely check it out. We harvest 1 leaf of our garlic per month until it's actually throwing its scape. So, I mean, because we grew 18,000 bulbs of garlic this year, we didn't harvest 1 leaf of every single one, but we could. So yeah, as long as you're harvesting just 1 leaf of your garlic each month, then you're not overtaxing your garlic. So yeah, it's delicious. This just didn't taste like garlic. And so it's awesome.
And that was the last question.
Amazing. Well, it's time for a shameless plug and a poem. So I would love to suggest, if you don't already take notes, we have our lovely Across the Seasons calendar. If you don't already have, you can also use spreadsheets. There's all kinds of tools and technology for taking notes. And I hope that you do, because I always think that I'm going to, remember things like, I'll remember that that's music planted there and Italy Hill planted over here. Oh gosh, label your garlic. There's so much more to share. So check out our growing guide, check out our free online course, our Garlic and Shallot Academy, and take notes. And our Across the Seasons calendar is such a fun way to take notes. So in all of this, I'm hopping over to October and September. You can see like there's dates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but instead of Monday through Sunday, we have years. So you can see here's our 2020 notes, our 2021 notes. So you can see, when did you plant and when did it emerge and how much did you mulch with? So there's lots of ways to take notes, and I encourage you to, all those patterns that are emerging are part of how your garlic is growing you. And so here is our poem, friends, that we began with, that I would love to end with. And it's so amazing how dark it is already. Happy autumn indeed. So here we have a poem by our dear friend Digger down in the Hudson Valley. Plenty and enough. Underground, the garlic seed is multiplying. Yesterday, we planted one. Tomorrow, there will be many. Abundance is the dream this world is made from. Abundance not just for one, but abundance, plenty, and enough for all. So thank you, friends, for sowing garlic. This is the radical act of faith that even as one season ends, another is beginning. It is, you are the living link. These garlic cloves are the living link of the last 6,000 years of our ancestors and their brilliance. And we sowing these cloves are becoming good ancestors ourselves. So thank you for sowing garlic, and may you reap what you sow and what you sow into, and may you not be shy. Until next time, friends, thank you for joining me. And thank you, Stacy. Sending love from our gardens to yours.